When it comes to buying an automatic watch, the options are truly endless. You have watches that cost a few $100s and you have watches that cost thousands. Both can be claimed as automatic watches, however, they couldn't be more different from each other. So what should you know before purchasing your first automatic watch? Well, first things first, I want to point out that most people are just guessing. Here's what I mean by that. In researching this video, I found articles that recommended both winding an automatic watch fully and just a few times before setting it. Overall, this is a good practice. You should wind even an automatic watch a few times before you set it. I recommend winding it 10 to 20 times. This prevents you from damaging the watch or movement, and it also ensures things are working correctly before you go and set the watch. However, the fact that everyone seems to recommend something a bit different, even me recommending 10 to 20, it's different for everybody, and it just is proof that everyone's kind of just guessing as to what people should do with their watches. And sadly, I think that scares a lot of people off from this amazing hobby. Our goal here is to do the exact opposite of that. We want to bring as many people into watches as possible. And assuming that you're just getting into watches, it's worth noting that automatic watches can also be referred to as a mechanical watch. However, not all mechanical watches are automatic. Automatic watches have a weight within the watch that rotates throughout the day. Winding the watch as you wear it and your wrist moves. The other kind of mechanical watch is actually a hand-wound watch, and the only way to wind this watch and power it is to use the crown and wind it up. Automatic watches can also be wound using the crown. Like I said, you should do that before setting the watch. But hand-wound manual watches can only be powered using the crown on the watch. Something else I wanted to note about setting your watches is that it's recommended not to set your watch between 11 and 1. The reason for that is that's when the date is changing, and sometimes setting the watch during that time can damage things. With that being said, I've actually never really cared about this. I've always just set my watch and kind of never looked. I suppose this is more of a do as I say, not as I do moment. Now you may be wondering why I've talked about setting the watch so much when one of the points of an automatic watch is that you don't have to set it as frequently as maybe a hand wind watch where you constantly have to remember to wind the watch in order to keep it running. Well, unless you have one automatic watch that you truly plan on wearing every single day, you're going to be setting your watch pretty frequently. I have 6 automatic watches currently, and the longest power reserve one has is 90 hours. The shortest is 48 hours. Meaning that if I wanted to make sure that all of my automatic watches were always running, I would have to do some very careful scheduling, if it was even possible. There are winders that can keep your watch running even if you aren't wearing it for a few days, but overall, those aren't worth it, especially for beginners. Speaking of something that a lot of beginners don't think about though when it comes to automatic watches and all mechanical watches really, is maintenance. All mechanical watches require maintenance, and if you ask a manufacturer, they're going to tell you every 5 to 10 years you should plan on getting your watch serviced. From experience though, most people don't follow this, and instead, they kind of just keep wearing their watches until something feels off or it just stops working entirely. The route you take is up to you, but know that if you wait until something breaks or feels a bit off, you may be spending a bit more on your service than if you had sent it in on a regular schedule because, well, something's broken, you're probably going to need some sort of a replacement part. As far as costs go though, it really just depends on the brand and the watch that you're servicing, as well as what is wrong with the watch when you do send it in. Overall, most services come in somewhere between $500 and $1,000, but I have seen some super high-end brands go for well over $3,000–$4,000 for service. Don't let service scare you off though. If you buy your watch brand new, you are years away from having to get it serviced, and in most cases, if something breaks within the first year or 2 years depending on the manufacturer, you are covered under a warranty and they'll take care of it free of charge. On top of that, these watches aren't as fragile as you may think. Before I got into mechanical watches, I was buying quartz watches between $75 and $100. Needless to say, you get what you pay for, and I thought these watches were fragile. They felt like they were going to break easily. It felt like the bands were going to come off. They felt fragile. Turn that around to even the $215 Swatch System 51 that I've got on my wrist right here, and it feels like a completely different world. Even with this being a budget automatic watch, I'm not afraid that it's going to completely break if I just accidentally ding it on a door. As long as you buy from a reputable brand, you're most likely going to be blown away by the quality and how sturdy your new automatic watch feels compared to quartz battery-powered watches. That is, unless you buy a vintage watch. Overall, I'd recommend new collectors stay away from vintage watches altogether. With that being said, we have a video that you can check out right here, which goes over exactly why you shouldn't buy a vintage watch as a new collector.